But thank you both for being willing to talk about one of my absolute obsessions with Rory Gallagher. And I just feel so honored to be able to chat with you both. What a treat for me. And thank you for all the work you put into this fabulous book,
Oh,
Rory
thank
Gallagher,
you.
the later years. Let me just start by asking you each just how does it feel to have accomplished this, what you set out to do, and then also just what's the reaction been?
Um, yeah, it still feels really surreal to be honest, because it's been, for the last few years, it's been our whole life. It's been just dedicated to this heavy, intensive research, the writing process. And, even now, a couple of months down the line, I still wake up and think, oh, I've got to submit the book, and then realize, no, actually, it's come out already. Um, so yeah, it feels really surreal. And so yeah, the reaction on the whole has been really positive from fans. It's been really nice to hear their feedback on the book. I think particularly, because this is an aspect of Rory's life that hasn't been looked at in much detail in the past, or there's very kind of biased perceptions as we show in the book of those final years. So I think yeah, people have found it refreshing, I hope.
Yeah. How about you, Rain?
Um, yeah, I think Lauren's been in touch with a few other people more so than I have about how the book was received. But I think what really put it sort of made it real was I was just looking at the reviews of the book just on Amazon just to like, see, oh, I wonder how it's doing. Because I kind of after it came out, I sort of tried to distance myself from it just to like um, I kind of got too close to it, so I just wanted to um, take time out. And then so I was like, oh, I'll just check the reviews just to see them. And I think seeing those and reading them, and you know, I think one of the main things we wanted out of the book was the fans, to like it and to get something out of it and to learn something maybe or whatever it was. And that was what I was seeing on the reviews, which was nice. And um, some of the names I recognized from like, they're just
Yeah.
readers of the blog, and that was nice. But then some of them I didn't. And so just to see that, oh, we seem to be reaching a lot of people, was nice. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And for those watching, this is a really interesting collaboration because Lauren, you're in England. Where are you located? What town or city
So I'm
exactly?
currently in Cardiff in Wales, but from Bristol
Oh,
originally.
oh, okay. From Bristol, you said originally.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Rain, you're based in Sydney, Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
just this whole can one of you just talk about how this whole project came up, going back to the Rewriting Rory effort, the web page and getting on social media. I was following you on social media long before I believe there was talk of a book, or that I knew at least there was a book on the
Mm.
way. So how did you two, somebody give me the backstory. How did you two meet it? How did you know that your interests would align around this approach to treating the later part of Rory's life?
Do you want me to go for it, Rain, and you can
Yeah.
add
I'll
in?
I'll meet you halfway.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So it all started through the Instagram community for Rory Gallagher, during the COVID pandemic. So I think a lot of people during that time discovered Rory's music, or they were looking to interact with other people, and they kind of found that platform on Instagram. And at first there were just a couple of fan accounts, and then it gradually grew. And I think like the whole community grew out of that really, where Rayne had a fan page, I had a fan page, other people did. And so it sort of just started through that, really, just informal conversations. And then I guess over time, me and Rayne were speaking particularly about the final decade of Rory's career, which we gravitated towards, and just, again, all the things we discuss in the book about the attention that hasn't been given to it and all the amazing things he was still doing. And it just gradually evolved over time then into this idea for the blog, Rewriting Rory. And I think, we've just realized we had so much content there that hadn't been shared before that we wanted to make it more permanent. And so then thoughts sort of shifted to the book idea.
Yep.
Yeah. I think it was as we were saying, we when we were writing those, we did that Q&A for you. We were saying about it was the followers and well, not followers. That sounds weird, but read the readers of the blog and their support of that, and you know, it was quite lucky that we also had a sort of academic background as well, and um, what we were, it kind of just helped things a little bit, let's just put it that way. And we both kind of like to write and we love researching and all that stuff. And we were just always curious about Rory's life and just different aspects, but just happened to be that the last 10 years was something that we were both really interested in. And yeah, it was the readers and also just people we interviewed as well. They seemed to be very on board with what we were doing and, the whole our sort of message with the blog and everything like that. So just to do the book, I mean, I liked doing the website and everything like that, but I by the end of it, I was like, I kind of want to do something more, and Lauren agreed, so that's why we did the book. Otherwise, we just kept going with the website. But yeah,
Yeah, and I remember. Do you remember when we were planning posts for the future as well? And I think we ended up having like a couple. We were like, if we carry on with monthly posts, there's at least 3 years of content here. And then I think that's
yeah,
when we started thinking, well, maybe this should become a book instead. And I think, as you were saying
yeah,
as well, like the support that we had, particularly from people that knew Rory, friends, family, that was just a major driver for us. Some of the feedback that we got from very early, like Rory's cousin Jim, he was just so
yeah,
lovely, and Bob Hewitt, Roberto Mann. So all these people that without their voices, it would have been really hard to get this off the tracks, I think. But yeah, they just so supportive from the beginning.
yeah.
Yeah. Did you encounter any folks who just declined to help? I mean, just because they wanted to let it rest or for whatever reason?
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't name names, but yeah, some
No.
people we did reach out to, and
Yeah.
we either didn't get a reply, or it was just difficult to
Yeah,
arrange things, so it didn't go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And how
yeah,
about the help from Donald, from Rory's brother?
Yeah, I mean, we were clear from the start that we always wanted to get permission from the family to pursue this project because, there has been books in the past they haven't been happy with, and they're very protective of Rory's legacy, and rightly so. So I was lucky that I'd been in touch with Donald for a few years already, so I had kind of some form of relationship with him. So we just kept them informed from the very beginning, and Daniel as well, who's obviously a major part of the estate. So yeah, we basically just told them along the way, didn't we, Rayne, kind of what we were doing, sent them chapters,
yeah,
updates. So they were on board with it, and we were great. When we saw that they'd kind of retweeted us and they'd reshared the book on Instagram, that was just amazing to see.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's great. There is an intensity about Rory fandom. Would you agree that there's if once you're in, and it is
yeah,
unwavering admiration for his performances, his recordings, everything about his legacy. So in some ways, the fact that you were going to take a careful look at a period of his life that was overlooked, I think, speaking for myself, we were thrilled to see that kind of attention given to it. But you're also wading into something that could be delicate, and you have to tread a little lightly to make sure you get it right.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, go
Sorry.
ahead, Ruth. That's okay.
Um, that kind of links up to some the other question as well, because I was going to say there was all the respect because some fans that we contacted, for like if they they attended a concert, just for something for the book, they would sometimes decline because they didn't want to. It was their memory of Rory, and they didn't want to share that publicly. And if there had been any other fan, they would have been like, oh, a book, I want to be featured in the book, and
Yeah.
they didn't do that, some of them. And, that just kind of shows, I guess, what, the kinds of people that are out there and also just the fans of Rory and how they still feel about him. So, yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts about that, Lauren, just in terms of,
Yeah.
was it tricky to write? It must have been. It's sometimes a little
Yeah, I mean, I was
daunting.
consciously aware of that position of being a fan and an academic and how to manage those things because, as an academic, you're curious, you want to research things and tell the story, but I also feel super protective of Rory, and I think there was a
Yeah.
line I knew we didn't want to cross, and certainly not everything we were told we decided to put in the book. Whereas I do think, other people may have had less scruples with that and thought, oh, this is a good story, I'll put it in. But we constantly weighed things up, and I think particularly with that
Yeah.
final chapter, Rayne, about the '95 tour, we had so many discussions
Yeah.
back and forth about how much is too much information. We want to tell people about this because there's so many misconceptions about the final tour and what happened. But again, just being aware of
Yeah.
Rory's privacy, that respect for him, and he was so ill at that time that these gigs are not a true reflection of how he was. So yeah, that was very tough, and we edited so much and ended up leaving quite a bit out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was hard because a lot of the things, the questions that we had and like the challenges was writing about his illnesses and framing that correctly. And, there is still like, we tried our best, to timeline that 95 tour as well, like just, what was occurring at what time and how sick he was at that time and trying to do our best without directly going to the family as well. We didn't really want to, not to get too into it, but we didn't really want to contact them about that. We sort of just wanted to piece it together because we knew it was so sensitive for them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and but at the same time, we want to be factual. So there was always that we had to worry about, and it was difficult that last chapter to write because it was hard to balance it with, a lot of some of the other chapters, like Rory was sick, and that's the negative side. But the other side is, but look at this performance that he did, or look at this version of, A Million Miles Away. This is very good stuff. That 95 tour was not like that. So that was really difficult, but hopefully we kind of balanced it okay for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, it's interesting to me. There are still folks out there who don't know Rory,
Yeah.
which is amazing. I'm wondering, and this is sort of putting you on the spot, but if you bump into somebody who doesn't know him, I'd love to have each of you sort of describe or give me a sample of well, how do you introduce somebody to Rory? What do you say that about his unique qualities? I don't mean to lead the
Uh,
wit. I don't mean to
yeah.
lead the witness here, but what do you say?
It's something I find really hard to put into words because I just think there's really no one like him. It's just such a one-off, unique person. And I had this, it was a couple of years ago when I was in one of my local record shops and I was buying an album and the guy said to me at the till about, oh, Rory Gallagher, yeah, I've heard about him. Like, what makes him so good? And I almost froze because I was like, I don't even know where to begin telling you. So, you just have to see him. And I think it is the live performance. Just you can't take your eyes off of him on stage. He's just so magical. But then I think there's that other element of him as a person as well. You just don't hear a bad word about him. He was such a special person, and yeah. So I just think it's all of that combined for me. I just think he's such a role model. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with Lauren. It's tough. Because it was funny. I was wearing a Rory shirt. I work at a bottle shop, and I was just wearing a Rory shirt, and immediately they see Gallagher, and they think Gallagher, of course. But and they always say, "Oh, are they related to Oasis?" That's what this person said,
Yeah,
and it was
yeah.
so hard because it was like, "Oh God, no!" Like I was just kind of cringing, but um, even then, I was like, "How do I even begin to, just quickly, 5 minutes or even less, just um, describe him?" But yeah, I first go with, who he is as a person, probably even before the music, because um, you can have a really good musician, but you don't always have a good person. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really an incredible combination, especially in the rock and roll world, all the cliches about rock stars. He really
Mm.
was the anti-rock star in terms of his personal life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there one album that you tell people to start with? Is it
Oh, mine's
possible?
Fresh Evidence, which is not the usual choice, but for me it's
Yeah,
Fresh Evidence. That's just, yeah, it represents everything for me
Yeah.
about Rory.
yeah,
Yeah, I try to sort of like ask the person what they listen to or what they tend to listen to, and if it's more of like a hard rock, like just classic rock, if that's what they like, I'd go for your like a top priority or something. But if they like more of the folky kind of light stuff, maybe, his first album or maybe some of the Taste stuff, because there's a lot of light stuff on Taste. It just depends. Like I try to work it out like that instead of just forcing people like what I like because they might not
yeah,
like, the certain album, but yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and to that point, I think one thing that comes through very clear in the book, and I really compliment you on it, and is just a plain fact, is, you can take Rory and kind of pigeonhole him as a blues rock guitar player, but in
Mm.
fact, the wide range of styles and the diversity over all from Taste through the end is really remarkable.
Mm.
Calling Card and some of the quieter stuff on the opening album. Um, just right on through. Fresh Evidence for sure. I mean, the sheer variety within that one album is just remarkable. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I think that's something we were quite keen to do as well, because obviously he's an incredible blues musician, but again, he's not just the blues. There's so much more to him,
Yeah.
so many different elements. And I think that is what made him stand out from a lot of his peers, and particularly that Celtic sound that you can hear in his music. It's there in the lyrics that are just, more sophisticated than what you think of typical rock lyrics or whatever. And then, yeah, particularly in those later years, how he was branching out into so many different areas. And I think what was to come, that folk route, the jazz fusion stuff. There were just so many interesting avenues there.
Yep. One thing that I really appreciated, it wasn't overemphasized in the book at all, but it was in there. Being a crime fiction writer myself, just and being a huge fan of Patricia Highsmith in particular, I've read all her novels and short
Yeah.
stories, and I love Dashiell Hammett and others. Is his fascination with crime fiction, with that whole genre, and
Mm.
just how that
Mm.
all sort of came out in his music. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was there from time to time, different songs and different themes. Really, kind of just that alone kind of makes for an interesting rock star, a guy who's clearly reading books and being entertained by classic writers. Was that something you knew going into this project that was there?
Um,
Yes.
yeah, that's always something I love. 'Cause I'm an avid reader as well. So, when I found out Rory was like, this is great. And actually, I remember there was a group of us on Instagram in the pandemic that were, going through some of his books and reading them. So some of them are behind on this
Oh, that
poster. So yeah, so we started kind of working through them and reading them, and I got into Patricia Highsmith that way as well. Um, and yeah, I guess the Defender chapter, which Rayne wrote, is probably where you see most clearly that crime influence. But as you say, going
Yeah.
back to the earlier material, it's there, and other books that he'd read, like Daughter of the Everglades, was inspired by a book he was reading at the time.
I didn't.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
it's always been there.
Yep. Yep. But when you leaned away, we could see Rory's strat there,
There
or
you
at
go.
least I don't think that's the actual strat, but what is that?
I wish it was. It was a poster
Yeah.
that the estates sold a few years ago on the website. So yeah, it was a photo shoot that they did with Rory's original Strat and then his book collection behind it.
You mean those aren't his actual books?
Yeah. So Donald's still got his book collection.
Wow.
So yeah, I'll send you a close up of it, Mark, because you can see all the crime fiction on there and everything.
Wow. And you've been reading or have read them all, or?
No, not all of that. That would be great to
Yeah.
work through them, but yeah, slowly I'm working my way through.
Yeah. Any favorites that you discovered? I mean, I'm always looking for book recommendations.
It's definitely Patricia Highsmith for me. It's that
Yeah.
psychological thriller aspect that I like. I found it a bit tougher to get into the hard boiled stuff. But yeah, the psychological aspects I really enjoy.
Yeah. There's something about Patricia, actually, I haven't really thought about this, but too much, but characters are so interior. You're so inside her characters' heads. And you know, my wife, when she reads them, she feels more creeped out than any other writer because you are inside the head of somebody who's going to do
Yeah.
something very dark. And so there's the external and then there's the internal for these characters. And Rory clearly also had a lot going on inside him. That there
Mm.
was just a lot of, I don't know how to describe it. Maybe you can do it better, but he had his public face and then I think he had a very, very, very private life. Do you agree?
Yeah. Rayne, do you want to say something on that? Or?
If you want to go first, I might just think on it actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess yeah, that's the thing, is it the classic thing that people say about the Jekyll and Hyde aspect of Rory's personality, that
Yeah.
how you saw him off stage wasn't at all the man that you saw on stage. And Donald's spoken himself about what a solitary person Rory was. So I think yeah, there was a lot going on inside of him, and music
Mm.
was that outlet for him to express himself. And in songs like A Million Miles Away, that's such a powerful song. That's my favorite Rory song, where I think you really do get that deep insight into him. And as much as he was private, I think that Donald again has sort of said he wore his heart on his sleeve of his lyrics, and I think it's true. If you listen to them, you really do get a sense of who he was.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, I
What?
agree with that.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Rain. Go ahead.
No, I agree with that. I don't
Yeah.
really have anything to
Yeah.
add.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rory even he used the phrase Jekyll and Hyde referring to himself. He
Yeah.
understood that. Yeah. Something when he hit the stage, something switched, and that was
Mm.
just a whole different side of himself. This is a hard question to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it's almost impossible to answer, I think. But what would you have, if you had a chance to interview him, what would you have wanted to ask him? What do you think didn't get asked of him that should have been asked?
Oh, that is a hard question. um. Oh, I mean, I guess I would like to know more about the. I said it is all about the music, and it's not about the kind of the personal life. But I would like to know more about his interests off stage. So, I've seen criticisms before of people saying how Rory's often presented as very one-dimensional, and that it's all about the music and that's that. But he was a really intelligent, complex person, and there was so much more to him. Even though obviously music was the core part of his life. So even as we're saying about his interest in crime fiction and things like that, I just feel like I'd love to have a proper talk with him about books or about movies. He was such a big film buff.
Yeah.
So yeah, so those other aspects of his life, just his views on things, because he's very cultured. He'd read up about the countries that he went to and about the politics, the history of the country. So I think, yeah, those kind of conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the same thing. There are some interviews he did later on that Young Guitar magazine he does in 91 is a really nice one because he's talking about he talks about the music obviously and his instruments, equipment, all the usual stuff, but he does touch on some other things, just um how the world is going on, technology and all these other things, and it's like those kinds of conversations, those sort of questions. I mean, I guess he'd only sort of talk like that if he was in a really relaxed kind of interview state.
Yeah.
But those sorts of times would have been nice. And also maybe to have an interview with him that wasn't recorded. I think things like that help the interviewee because, you know, they're allowed to kind of speak freely and things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Rain. I mean, it sounds to me like you both would prefer to just sidle up to him in a pub and start
Yeah.
chatting rather than like trying
Yeah.
to, download his personality or download his takes on all these different things. And I guess, you can kind of feel, even reading some of these interviews, you can, or listening to them, you can hear that guarded sense
Yeah.
from Rory. Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny
Yeah.
because just this week, a new interview came up on YouTube from 1991. And it's been out before, but just in like a written format, redacted. And so this was the full interview. And I was speaking to a friend about it yesterday, and we were saying exactly that. Like, that's kind of self-deprecation that Rory had. Sometimes it just really, I feel so sad when I hear it, because he was getting so praised in this interview, by this interview, and he was just playing everything down, or almost like he's afraid to admit that he's, good and talented. And anytime he did say something, he'd say, "Oh, but such and such is better," or and yeah, I was listening to it and I was thinking, oh, I just want to, tell you how good you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just another thing, it was a lot of times when we were doing the book and just writing, I would say to Lauren, "Oh, I wish I could just ask Rory what he thought of,
Yeah.
his album now, with so much like time passed, because sometimes, especially with albums like Defender and that whole time, Torch, that's something I would have want to ask him about, because to do that timeline was so hard. You just had to
Yeah.
kind of piece it together with interviews at that time. But as time goes on, obviously wounds heal, and just to ask him now about different things would have been nice, just to get a different reflection on it. And it's sad that we can't do it, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's frustrating in some ways because you just want to reach back and make him happy. You just get this
yeah,
feeling like, look at what you
yeah,
accomplished. Look at the enthusiasm when you walk into a hall and start playing live, and
mm,
it's packed back to the very back, and everybody is just jamming completely, and you're entertaining them for
yeah,
3 hours. The high
Yeah.
must be extraordinary. And then to read about his struggles recording and um, trying to capture in his head what he wants to capture in a
yeah,
studio setting, and just his the work and frustration and money and time that,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. What, you just can't go back and rewrite. Well, yeah, that's what you trying to do,
We
give
try
us a
and do
better sense, but yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the San Francisco, the whole um, Wheels on Wheels project. Can you just, that's such an interesting time to me, and what he was trying
Mm.
to do, and what happened to that. That was really fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That kind of ties with your chapter more, doesn't it, Rayne? Because you kind of talked about that when you were
yeah,
looking at Torch.
um, yeah, we did. I think it's a time that we both quite like, actually.
Mm.
I guess I kind of thought of Defender as just a kind of another photo finish, and that's at least how, well, the San Francisco slash, yeah. I think that's how Rory kind of thought of it a little bit. Um, yeah, that's an interesting time. It just seems, from also just generally a music perspective as well, and a historical perspective of what's going on at that time, and just um, sort of the reactions to the different music of, the disco and punk, and even sort of how they're reacting then to a couple of years before that. Um,
Mm.
and I think Rory's obviously feeling that at the time, and he's feeling stuck. And um, I guess that's why he did the, split with the band and all that. What else should we talk about?
Yeah. Just
Well,
Yeah.
did I answer that properly, or I don't know. I just kind of
yeah.
talked.
It's just
Um,
interesting what his process for finally sort of just as, saying to himself when he finished a studio project like it was done and it was ready to go.
yeah,
I think one of the things you really make clear is he didn't just jump into a studio and peel something off. Yeah,
No, not at all.
his work ethic
Yeah,
was incredible.
It was crazy, and I think that's the thing. You just cannot keep up that intense pace that he did. The touring alone in the
yeah,
70s were like 300 gigs a year. Then you add in the albums on top of that, and as you say, it did become more protracted over time. So he'd spend longer in the studio, and that's something. When I spoke to Mark Feltham, he sort of said it was that the procrastination is something that did get worse. That Rory just agonized over what was the best take, and would just constantly remixing, and right up until kind of the day that he had to hand it into the record company. So, and I think, he really did care over his albums. And I think sometimes that's something that's a bit brushed aside because there is that focus on the live performer. And it's like, oh, studio albums were secondary. But I think that was something that really bugged Rory. And he really did want to produce that studio album that made people stand up and think, wow, this is great. And even going back to some of the early interviews when we were doing our research, like even in the sort of mid 70s, he's already saying, I want to have this studio album,
yeah,
So it was there at his mind. It wasn't just the live aspect. And I do think
yeah.
Yep.
his
I
studio, well, he
think.
just became more
Uh,
sophisticated in the studio over time. We've spoke about that ourselves, haven't we? Just again going to like Fresh Evidence, and I just think it's just the sound of that album is incredible. He just got everything right down to a fine art by then.
Yeah, I think like the album, and having that was sort of an idea he wanted even early, like as you said earlier, than just in
Yeah.
the 80s or 90s. And an idea that we were kind of like discussing a lot was the two aspects of Rory where it's sort of the live performer and the sort of um you know the like humble and also kind of obviously doing things that how he was doing those first couple of albums where just doing it in one take or
Yeah.
doing it as is. There's that, but can he also be an artist where he wants to, how like they talk about Brian Wilson, where he's the artist and he's in the studio and all that. Can Rory be a Brian Wilson? Can we
Mm.
talk about him in those same terms? Some people don't want to, and some other people do. And it's only until, I'm sure Rory was thinking this at the same time. He's like, I don't want to be thought of as just this blues guy who comes on stage and whatever. I want to be known as a Brian Wilson of the blues or something like that, as an
Yeah.
innovator. I don't think he felt he was being respected in that way. I'm sure other people were thinking about it, but maybe not writing it or maybe not
Mm.
saying it, and um, maybe it took all this time to realize that,
Mm.
uh, or something like that.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. I think I appreciate that a lot. Yeah. Any
Yeah.
thoughts on that, Lauren?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point too. And I think it's true about these things just didn't seem to be appreciated in his lifetime. And I think that was one of our great frustrations writing this, when you see all the anguish that Rory went through, and he just felt there was a lack of respect for him. And, particularly with this blues revival in the 90s, that a lot of people did
Yeah.
jump on the bandwagon with it. And, he'd been doing this stuff for years and being criticized for doing it. And I can just see how that could eat you up as a person, especially if you are a sensitive person like Rory was. And yeah, and now you see posthumously all this credit. Even I sort of get really frustrated at it. So I can just imagine how he must have felt.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it just it's one of those things. Once that, and I think you really make that point in the book too, that once the public story kind of gets going, it's easy for writers coming behind that story to just sort of cheat
Mm.
and take the shortcut
Yeah.
and they open up the
Yeah,
clips of what's already been said, and they kind of think that that's true, and they
yeah.
download that into their story because they don't want to, and this is being general, but they don't want to put in the work of really understanding what's going on. They tend, they're moving from story to story to story. They're a music writer and they're just grabbing the bullet points, the
Mm.
highlights, and they think, like you say, that here's the typical narrative arc, and we're going to buy into
Yes.
this. We're going to buy
Yeah.
into the story.
And the constant focus, as we say in the book, about his weight gain, about his clothing, and that just took away from the music. It was just constantly focusing on that. And Yeah,
Yeah.
that was just really upsetting to see. And funnily enough, the interview that came out this week on YouTube, Rory himself says about you can hear his frustration in it. And he says, I'd turn up to the interview wearing whatever, like a black shirt, and then they'd write I'm wearing a check shirt. So, it was just constantly fighting against this thing that the press had against him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it really shows you how powerful the press can be, and in terms of shaping a public narrative around a character, a person, an artist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And I mean,
Yeah.
now and look, now is that was the days before social media, and now where things can be done even more. But then that works in a positive way as well, I think, and that's something we tried to show, particularly towards the end of the book, with the sort of new generation that's getting into Rory and the work of the estate on social media, and how that's actually, it's almost worked the other way, and it's worked in his favor, and he's sort of more popular than ever now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Wow. Well, you do a great job, particularly of capturing in your writing about those live performances towards the end of his career. I really felt like I was there,
Mm.
and your detailed descriptions of his performances and really just taking them on their own terms
Mm.
musically, and as a band, looking at the way they performed and interacted and understood each other as performers, really appreciated. And it's an academic book, like you point out, but I've got to say, if folks read it, they'll realize you're putting music in our heads all the time
Mm.
we're reading this. There, I don't think we go a few paragraphs without getting a reference to a great song or
Mm.
um, yeah, it's really terrific. Wow.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's been one of the nice things, actually, that some people that have fed back have actually said, they're slowly reading the book because they want to actually dig into the music as they go. So, with the first section that goes through the three albums and the session work, they're actually stopping to listen to that. And then the same with the different concerts, they're watching them. And so that's really nice to hear.
Yeah, that's great. You
Mm.
should, yeah, and you really literally can do this because you've got so many references in there to the various YouTube clips and the dates and the
Mm,
performances and what to go watch. Yeah. Yeah. And there's just
yeah.
tons of material out there. Yep. Yep.
Mm. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to go on and on, but I could probably talk all day. But what are a couple more questions? What are some of the better post, um, the later releases that the state has been putting out? Do you lean toward one or two of the um, compilations or live performances that have been put out since his passing?
I really like Kickback City, going back to the crime thing again, just because I think it's such a unique concept. And that, I guess, when we're talking about, things you wish you could show Rory or tell him nowadays, that's one of them that I just think that was such a thoughtful release. And I think he would love it. Just the idea of the novella written by Ian Rankin, the drawings that were done, and then the audio alongside Rory's crime songs. I just think it works so well as a package. So yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite releases. And then I guess obviously loving the later years, the All Around Man release from
Yeah.
last year from the 1990
Yeah.
gigs. That was incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, All Around Man is amazing. Yep. And one of my favorite
Yeah.
songs. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that one too. I did like the Calling Cleveland thing they did, the acoustic and the electric albums. I really like that because it was around the same time that I got into Rory, and I just remember that being so. They did so many releases during that COVID time, and it
Yeah,
really
there was a
helped.
lot.
They did that compilation as well, which I still listen to, and I would recommend that to someone as well if they wanted to get into Rory, because I think it does showcase a lot of nice. It's a nice overview of his career, and
Yeah.
just as a beginning start. Um, yeah, I think that one is
Yeah.
nice.
Very good. And just as we wrap up here, and I'll let you go, but I always love getting recommendations from fans of books when I talk to them about books, like recommending other books. Who else are you listening to today? What do people who love Rory Gallagher like myself? I try to listen to a lot of new music today. I love trying to keep up with what's going on, but maybe you've got somebody else who gets overlooked or a band that's out there right now that's touring hard and you just happen to love? I'd love some recommendations.
I got to admit, I don't really listen to anything modern
Okay.
at all.
That's
My kind of holy trinity, as I always say, is Rory, Thin Lizzy, and Tom Petty. And to be honest, that's people that I listen to most of the time.
You can't go wrong with Tom Petty or Thin Lizzy. That is for
Yeah.
darn sure. Actually, got to see Thin Lizzy open for Queen at a show in
Oh, did
Boston.
you?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Phil Lynott and yep, overlooked guitar player too, or just musician, I should say. Yeah, yep,
Yeah, definitely.
yep. Rayne, how about you? Yeah, you've got some
Um,
posters on your wall. I think you've got some other ideas.
yeah. Um, it's really weird that I've sort of taken a back seat with listening to a lot of music. I know it sounds, I mean, I did a music degree and everything, but um I'm not really too I'm trying to think of the last person I really got into. Um and it was probably Rory maybe, but you know what? I just like I'm more sort of just playlisting things now and just sort of, you know, um sort of trying to get more back into Australian music actually. Um and properly get into it as opposed to just hearing stuff on the radio all the time. Um but I'm not really too much into music. I'm more into movies now actually. So I just sort of get into a lot of film and actors and things like that. So yeah.
That's great. Well, I can imagine just based on how intense it must have been when you're writing this book to be so immersed and probably consuming so much Rory Gallagher to there
Yeah.
must have been at some point it must have felt good to take a little break from it must have been pretty
My
intense.
my break was kind of going to the 70s stuff, I think. It's like I have a break from the
Yeah.
90s. I just listen to the 70s Rory stuff instead.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Well, Lauren and Rayne, thank you so much. I would love a photograph of that bookshelf. If you think of it, that would be
Yeah, of
fantastic.
course. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll send it to
and
you.
thank you for what you've done for the community, for the Rory Gallagher community, and thanks for all your hard work. Just as one fan and big fan of the book, really appreciate all your work on this and for jumping on the interview and chat today.
Oh, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.